Hey guys, and welcome back to another SRG Family Trees video. In today's video, we are doing the Kings of Wessex, Anglo-Saxons, and the original Kings of England before William the Conqueror, or the Normans. So let's start back at the Kings of Wessex. Now, let me just say before I start, there were Kings of Wessex before this. But the main line, which was called the House of Wessex, started with this guy, Egbert. Now, he became King of Wessex when a very distant relative died, and he became it in 1802. He was a very powerful man and died at a very old age. At the time, he died in his late 60s. He was succeeded by his eldest son, Ethelwulf. Ethelwulf reigned for another couple years, and he fought off the Danish, who were like a main part of Wessex history. And then he kind of got overthrown, and then he died. Now, funny enough, his mother is actually unknown. Her name is unknown anyway. It's presumably a wife of Egbert, but we're not sure. He, on the other hand, married Osburh. Now, she bore him 5 sons. Now, as you can see right now on the family tree, you can only see 4. The eldest son, Ethelstan, died before his father. He was actually the eldest, and he was supposed to be the heir, but he died before all of his brothers. So, in 856, Ethelwulf's second eldest son, Ethelbald, while Ethelwulf was on a trip with Alfred the Great, you might recognise that name, Ethelbald became pretty much joint king. And when Ethelwulf came back, he found out that Ethelbald didn't want to stand down and wanted to keep being king. So Ethelwulf died in 858, which is why I've made it so Ethelbald was king in 858, because technically he became true king of Wessex after his father died. He had no kids though, and he died in his early 20s. Now, for the first of these brothers of Alfred the Great, they died really young. Ethelbald was succeeded by his third eldest brother, or the next eldest brother, Ethelbert. Now, Ethelbert was a lot more chilled out than his elder brother, but still died young without heirs, or any children for that matter. So he was succeeded by the next eldest brother, Ethelred the First. Now, Ethelred was much more of a battle-hardened man than his elder 2 brothers, and he did have 2 sons. But when he died, again in his 20s, or might have been his early 30s, they were both like under 5, so they weren't allowed to be kings of such a battle country where there were battles left and right. So he was succeeded in 871 by his youngest brother, Alfred the Great, who in 886 conquered the Danes and became king of the Anglo-Saxons, or, as I should say, he conquered the rest of what should have been England. Now, he died in 899, and he was succeeded by his son, Edward the Elder. Now, he started a war back up with the Danes, which was a thing called Danelaw. That was like a country because they did not support England's law, so they put a Danish law. Now, Edward the Elder married 3 times, and his eldest son, Ethelstan, ruled after him, and he conquered Danelaw, and in 927 became king of all England. Now, he had no kids, and his next eldest brother was from his father's second wife, and then he died before his father. So Ethelstan was succeeded by his 18-year-old half-brother through his father's third marriage, Edmund the First. Edmund was a very war-type fellow. He was in a lot of wars. Now, Edmund had two sons, one at 19 and the other at 22, I believe. And he died young. A lot of the kings, except Egbert, which is funny because he was the furthest back, a lot of them died before 50, or just at 50. But Edmund couldn't let his sons rule because they were too young. So he had to let his brother, full brother, Edred, become king. Now, Edred, you might have said, he had kids, just like Alfred, so they was... No. Edred was ill. Edward was ill for most of his life. He died at 32, but he never married and never had kids anyway. But luckily, he reigned long enough that his nephew was old enough to become king. This is King Edwig. Edwig died very young. He died at 19. Now, that's a problem because he's known for having a lot of sexual affairs during his reign. But he married once and then died at 19. He was succeeded by his even younger brother, Edgar the Peaceful. Now, Edgar was incredibly young. He was about 16 or 15 when he became king. He reigned until his late 30s, though, and reigned for a pretty long time. So he was succeeded by his eldest son from his first marriage, Edward the Martyr. Now, Edward the Martyr is pretty famous because he actually got murdered by presumably his stepmother. But this is still unknown who he got killed by. He died at the young age of about 16. He was succeeded by his father's second marriage son, Ethelred II, the Unready. Now, Ethelred the Unready reigned for a really long time. I mean, even though he was about 12, he still reigned for ages. And here's the thing. Ethelred the Unready was a very non-war type guy. Instead of fighting, he liked buying war. So, there was a king named Sven Forkbeard, who at the time, which is about 1002, was king of Denmark. Now, there is something that happened in 1002, which is called the Dane Massacre, meaning Ethelred the Unready killed off every single Danish person, even if they weren't armed, and killed them. And one of them, sadly enough for him, was Sweyn Forkbeard's younger sister, Guinhild. Now, Sweyn didn't take that nicely, and in 1013 marched a massive fleet onto Ethel the Unready's land, took him off the throne in 1013, and was crowned king on Christmas Day 1013. Sadly enough, he died 2 months later. So, the most senior heir to Denmark was his son Canute the Great. Now, Canute the Great was really king of Denmark, but before that, Ethelred the Unready decided to come back after his exile in France and became king for 2 more years. He was succeeded by his eldest son from his first marriage, Edmund II. Now, Edmund was actually only king for less than a couple months, and he died in a mysterious way, but it's probably found out that somehow Canute killed him in some way. Now, Canute actually was a pretty good king, and you might know him for being able to pull the sea back, which isn't true. Now, Canute was succeeded by his second son, Arthur Canute in Denmark, and his eldest son, Harold I Harefoot in England. Now, Harold only reigned for 5 years and died fairly young. So he was succeeded by Arthur Canute, who was the daughter of Emma of Normandy, who was also the mother of the famous King Edward the Confessor, who Edward the Confessor was also the son of Ethelred the Unready, which is a little bit odd, I must not lie. Now, Arthur Canute died very young, and the House of Denmark, or the Danes, went to a distant cousin. When Arthur Canute died, though, it went all the way back to Edward the Confessor, who reigned for 24 years and finally was actually a good king. He actually helped England at this point, and he got sainted. Now, Edward had no children, and actually the only thing he did was actually marry someone's daughter. Now, he married a girl named Edith Godwinson. Edith was the daughter of a man named Godwin. Now, Godwin was Earl of Wessex, and he had a son named Harold Godwinson. Now, Harold was presumably the successor that Edward wanted. William said it was him, Harold said it was him. Now, Harold was made Harold II after Harold Harefoot, and he was only king of England for only a couple months. Now, when he died, the crown went to William the Conqueror, the Normans. Now, in the next video, I will go over the Normans, and I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.